I was on the phone with my insurance company when my cousin texted me. I remember the exact moment because I had been on hold for 22 minutes listening to the same 4 bars of elevator music loop over and over, and I was standing in my kitchen in my socks, one hand wrapped around a coffee mug that had gone completely cold. My phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced down. Hey, just so you know, me and Stephanie are moving to Austin next month. Already filed the paperwork on Grandpa's account. Talk soon. I set the mug down very carefully. The hold music kept playing. I read the message again. Already filed the paperwork on Grandpa's account. I hung up on the insurance company. My name is Cassidy. I'm 31 years old and I work as a financial analyst for a mid-size firm in Columbus, Ohio. I am, by most measures, the boring one in my family. My younger brother Kevin is the one who played guitar in a band all through his 20s and somehow turned it into a legitimate career teaching music. My cousin Darren, the one who sent that text, has always been the charming one, the one who could talk his way into or out of anything. The one my aunts describe as so ambitious in a tone of voice that I have learned, over many years, means something closer to so slippery. Our grandfather, Hal, built a trucking business from nothing in rural Pennsylvania starting in the 1970s. He never finished high school. He drove routes himself until he was 53 years old. By the time I was born, he had a small fleet of trucks and a reputation in 3 counties for being someone who kept his word. When he retired, he sold most of the business but kept 2 things: a piece of land outside Harrisburg that he leased to a local farming operation, and a family trust he set up with his attorney in 2009 to make sure that money went where he intended it to go. The trust had one purpose: to cover his care costs as he got older, and after he was gone, to pass to his grandchildren, equally, all 4 of us, when the youngest turned 30. That youngest grandchild was me. My 32nd birthday is in 14 months. Grandpa Hal has dementia. He was diagnosed 3 years ago, and for the past 18 months he has lived in a memory care facility outside Harrisburg that costs just over $9,000 a month. The trust was structured to cover that. His attorney, a woman named Judith who has handled his affairs for 15 years, is the named trustee. There is supposed to be a co-trustee, a family representative, who serves in an oversight capacity alongside her. That co-trustee was supposed to be my Uncle Reg, Darren's father. Uncle Reg passed away from a heart attack 14 months ago. And that, as far as I can piece together, is when Darren decided he saw an opening. I need to back up a little because the version of Darren I'm describing now is not exactly the version I grew up with. When we were kids, we were close. He was 3 years older than me, and he used to take me fishing at the creek behind his parents' house, and he was the one who taught me how to change a tire when I was 16. His mother, my Aunt Louise, is one of the kindest people I have ever known. For a long time, I think I extended some of that goodwill to him by association. The cracks started showing in his late 20s, a business venture that his parents quietly bailed him out of, a loan from Grandpa that was never repaid, a habit of showing up at family events and steering every conversation toward money, what things were worth, who was set up well, what the land outside Harrisburg might go for if it were ever sold. My mother noticed before I did. She used to say, "Cassidy, your cousin loves the idea of family more than he actually loves family." I thought she was being uncharitable. I was wrong. After Uncle Reg died, Darren started calling Judith's office more frequently. I know this because Judith told me later. He had questions about the trust structure. He asked about what happened to the co-trustee position now that his father was gone. He asked whether there were provisions for emergency disbursements. Judith told him the trust was not structured for disbursements outside of Grandpa's care costs and the eventual distribution to the 4 grandchildren, full stop. She said he seemed frustrated by that. 3 weeks after that conversation, he filed a petition with the county court to have himself appointed as successor co-trustee on the basis that he was the natural family representative following his father's death. He did not tell any of the other grandchildren he was doing this. He did not tell my mother or my Aunt Louise. He filed it and then he waited, and when Judith's office sent routine notification letters to family members of record, the address on file for me was my old apartment, the one I moved out of 2 years ago when I bought my house. I never got the letter. Here's what I did know. In the months before that text message, something felt off. It was small things at first. I called the memory care facility in March to ask about Grandpa's upcoming care review, the annual assessment they do to adjust his plan and confirm funding. The billing coordinator was perfectly pleasant but mentioned, almost in passing, that there had been some communication with the family about the payment schedule. I asked what she meant. She said she wasn't sure of the details, just that someone had called asking about deferring a payment. I said that was strange, because as far as I knew, the trust covered payments automatically. She said she'd note my concern and have someone follow up. No one followed up. In April, I visited Grandpa. He didn't know me that day. There are days he does and days he doesn't, and you learn to hold both gently. But I spent 2 hours there, and on my way out I stopped at the front desk and asked to speak to the business office manager. I wanted to confirm that his funding was current. The woman I spoke to pulled up his account and said yes, they were current, but there had been a 30-day delay on the February payment that was now resolved. She said it had been resolved by a direct transfer from an account she didn't have further details on. I sat in my car in that parking lot for a long time. I am a financial analyst. I know what a 30-day payment delay looks like when the money is supposed to be sitting in a trust earning modest interest and dispersing automatically. It looks like someone interfered. I called Kevin on the drive home. He hadn't heard anything unusual. He hadn't been contacted about any changes to the trust. I asked him when he'd last spoken to Judith, and he said he didn't think he had her contact information. I sent it to him. I asked him to call her. He called me back 2 days later. Judith had been trying to reach me, he said. She had sent a letter. She thought I'd received it. There was a court proceeding we needed to know about. I called Judith myself the next morning. She was direct with me, which I appreciated. She explained the petition. She explained that because I hadn't responded to the notification, she didn't yet know I'd never received it. The court had proceeded. Darren had been appointed successor co-trustee 6 weeks earlier. As co-trustee, he had signature authority on certain trust accounts. He had used that authority twice. The first time, he moved $40,000 from the trust's liquid savings into what Judith described as an account I'm still working to identify. The second time, he attempted to initiate a transfer of the land title outside Harrisburg, a transaction Judith had blocked because it required her signature as primary trustee, which she had refused. $40,000. Gone. Destination unknown. I asked Judith what our options were. She walked me through them carefully. She had already flagged the situation to the court. She was filing a motion to have Darren removed as co-trustee and to freeze any further transactions pending a full accounting. She needed the other beneficiaries, me, Kevin, and my cousin Wren, who was Aunt Louise's younger daughter, to submit affidavits confirming we had not consented to these transactions and had not been properly notified of the co-trustee appointment. I told her she would have mine by the end of the week. I also told her about the text. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Keep that. Screenshot it, back it up, screenshot it, back it up, send it to me." I did all three before I got off the phone. The text had come in at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning. By 11:47 on Wednesday morning, I had a folder on my computer with every piece of documentation I could gather. The screenshot, a record of my old address versus my current address on file with various institutions, the notes I'd taken after my conversations with the memory care facility, the call log from my discussion with the billing coordinator in March. I want to be honest about what that week felt like, because it wasn't just anger. Anger is clean. What I felt was something more complicated. This layered, nauseating mixture of anger and grief and something close to shame, even though I had done nothing wrong. Shame that I hadn't caught it sooner. Shame that I had, for years, given Darren the benefit of the doubt when my mother was right about him. Grief that the person who had taken me fishing at that creek as a kid was the same person who had stolen from a man who couldn't defend himself. A man who was sitting in a memory care facility in Pennsylvania, not knowing what year it was. I didn't tell anyone in the family except Kevin and Wren what was happening. Not yet. I asked them both to hold it closed while Judith did what she needed to do legally. Kevin was furious in the quiet way. He gets furious. Very still, very clipped sentences. Wren, who lives in Portland and had always been warmer toward Darren than any of us, was silent on the phone for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "My dad would have been devastated." She meant her father, Uncle Reg. And she was right. The motion Judith filed was granted within 3 weeks. Darren was removed as co-trustee. His access to the trust accounts was revoked. The The court ordered a full forensic accounting of all transactions since his appointment, and a freeze on the unidentified account he'd moved the money into pending the results. Here's the thing about moving money: when you have co-trustee authority and a paper trail, you don't get to just disappear it. The forensic accountant found it in 9 days. It was sitting in a joint account, Darren's and Stephanie's, in an Austin, Texas bank. They had opened it 3 months earlier. The $40,000 had moved there in 2 transfers, structured to stay just under certain reporting thresholds. The accountant flagged that structuring immediately. That flagging has a name in federal law. It's called smurfing, and it's a crime. I found out about the Austin account on a Thursday afternoon. I found out that same afternoon, from a text Ren sent me, that Darren and Stephanie had just arrived in Austin 2 days earlier. They had moved. They were, as far as they knew, starting over somewhere new with $40,000 that didn't belong to them. I didn't respond to his earlier text. I had been sitting on it for over 3 weeks. My phone showed that he'd sent 2 follow-up messages since, one asking if I'd gotten his first text, one saying he hoped everything was good with me, breezy, casual, the way you text someone when you think everything is fine. I read those messages. I set my phone down on my kitchen counter. I made a cup of coffee and I drank it slowly. Then I called Judith and asked her where things stood with the district attorney's office. She told me the referral had already been made. I've thought a lot about whether to describe what happened next in detail, because part of me still feels something when I think about it. Not sympathy exactly, but something adjacent to it. A residue of who we used to be to each other. What I know is this: Darren called me 3 days after the referral. It was a Saturday morning. I was at the farmer's market 2 blocks from my house, holding a paper bag of tomatoes, when my phone rang. I saw his name and stepped to the side of the path, between a plant stand and a honey booth, and answered. He sounded different. The easiness was gone. He said he needed to talk to me. He said there had been a misunderstanding with the trust, and he was trying to sort it out. He said he'd intended to pay it back, that he'd had an investment opportunity that was going to double the money, that it was supposed to be temporary, that he was going to make everything right before the distribution date. I listened to all of it. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I said, "Darren, the court has already been involved for a month. Judith filed her motion 3 weeks ago. The forensic accountant found the account in Austin. The DA's office has the referral." The silence on the other end of that call was the longest silence I've ever heard in my life. He said, "What?" I said, "I have to go." And I hung up. I stood there between the plant stand and the honey booth for a minute, holding my paper bag of tomatoes. The woman selling honey glanced at me. I think I looked strange. I probably looked like someone who had just done something very hard and wasn't sure yet how to feel about it. I bought a jar of clover honey I didn't need and walked home. The legal process after that took a long time, and I won't walk through every step of it because some of it is still ongoing. What I can tell you is that the $40,000 was recovered, all of it, returned to the trust through the court-ordered restitution process. Grandpa's care is funded. The memory care facility has not missed a payment since. Judith was appointed sole trustee until the distribution date, with an independent co-trustee named by the court. The land outside Harrisburg is still there, still leased to the same farming operation it has been for 11 years. It is not being sold. Darren and Stephanie are still in Austin. I don't know much about what their life looks like now. I know that his situation with the DA's office is not resolved, and I know that whatever happens there, it will follow him for a long time. Aunt Louise called me 4 months after all of this came to light. It was the hardest conversation I've had in recent memory, harder than the call to Judith, harder than the Saturday morning farmer's market call. Aunt Louise is 71 years old, and she loved her son, and she loved her husband, and she had to find out that one of those people stole from the other one's father. I didn't know what to say to her except the truth, laid out gently. She cried. I cried. She said, "Your grandfather deserves better than this." I said, "Yes, he does." She still calls me on Sundays sometimes. We talk about the weather and about Kevin's students and about whether the tomatoes at the farmer's market are any good this year. We don't talk about Darren. I don't know if we ever will. I think about the text a lot. The casual way it was written, just so you know, like he was telling me about a new apartment or a job change. Just so you know, I have moved. Just so you know, I have already done the thing, so there's nothing you can do about it. I think he genuinely believed that. I think he thought that by the time anyone sorted out what he'd done, he'd be in Texas with a fresh start and a head start, and we'd all be left back in Ohio figuring out the mess. He didn't know I'd been paying attention for months. He didn't know about the parking lot conversation and the call with Kevin and the folder on my computer. He didn't know that Judith had been trying to reach me and that as soon as she did, all of that quiet accumulation of small wrong details suddenly had a shape. He thought I was the boring one, the financial analyst who cared about spreadsheets and wouldn't make waves. He was right that I care about spreadsheets. He was wrong about the rest. My grandfather has good days and bad days. Last month was a good stretch. The nurses said he'd been more present, more talkative. Kevin drove up and spent an afternoon with him, and Grandpa knew him the whole time. Kevin said they talked about fishing. He said Grandpa remembered the name of the creek behind Aunt Louise's house and the summer he first took us there, and how I had dropped my rod in the water and Darren had waded in to get it back for me. I'm glad Kevin didn't tell me that story until later. I'm not sure I could have sat with it in the moment. What I know is that my grandfather worked for 50 years so that the people he loved would be taken care of. He drove those routes himself. He kept his word, and when he got to the point in his life where he could no longer keep watch over what he built, I could do it for him. That's all I did. I paid attention. I kept records. I made the calls. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a confrontation or a speech. It was a folder on a computer and a phone call to an attorney and a willingness to sit with uncomfortable things long enough to understand what they actually were. Kevin asked me once, after everything settled, whether I regretted any of it, whether I wished I had handled it differently. I told him no. I told him the only thing I regretted was not updating my address on file with Judith's office sooner, which I have now done, along with every other institution that matters. He laughed at that, the way he laughs when something is both funny and not funny at all. We are okay. Ren is okay. Aunt Louise is getting there. Grandpa is being taken care of. Sometimes that has to be enough, and right now, it is. I've been thinking about what actually happened here. Not the legal part, not the timeline, but the underneath of it. Because when I strip everything away, what I'm left with is something pretty simple. Darren made a series of choices, and every single one of them assumed I wasn't paying attention. That assumption was the thing that undid him. Not me. Not the court. Not Judith. His own certainty that I was too quiet, too buried in spreadsheets, too boring to look up and notice. There's something I want to say about that, because I think it matters beyond just this story. I was not naturally suspicious. I did not go looking for a problem. What I did was pay attention to small things that felt slightly wrong, and I sat with them long enough to let them tell me what they were. That's not instinct. That's not luck. That's a choice. The choice to stay present, to ask one more question, to follow up when no one calls back. It's a choice most people don't make because it's uncomfortable and slow and it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. Until it does. I think about my grandfather a lot in this context. Hal never had a financial analyst education. He didn't have any formal education past 8th grade. What he had was the discipline to show up every single day and do the thing he said he was going to do, and the integrity to make sure the people around him could count on that. He built something real because of those qualities, not in spite of hard circumstances, but straight through them. And when I was sitting in that parking lot outside his memory care facility, trying to make sense of a payment delay that shouldn't exist, I think what I was drawing on, without fully knowing it, was the example he set. You notice things. You don't look away. You do the work even when it's inconvenient. Darren had the same grandfather. He learned something different from him. Or maybe he stopped learning at some point, decided that the effort wasn't worth it, that there was a faster way. And the faster way looked appealing right up until the moment it collapsed on him entirely. That's not fate. That's not the universe balancing some cosmic ledger. That's just the natural consequence of who you choose to be over time. Choices accumulate. The shortcuts you take, the people you're willing to use, the things you tell yourself are temporary. They add up into a version of yourself that eventually has nowhere left to stand. I don't feel triumphant about any of this. I feel tired and a little sad and deeply grateful that I found out in time to do something about it. I feel grateful for Kevin, who drove 4 hours to see a grandfather who might not know his name. I feel grateful for Ren, who cried on the phone and still filed her affidavit. I feel grateful for Judith, who is thorough and steady and has been doing this work for 15 years because she believes it matters. Cassidy and I came out of this intact. Grandpa's care is funded, the land is still there, the trust will still distribute when the time comes. What I hope anyone takes from this is not the story of a dramatic betrayal or a satisfying reversal. What I hope is this: the quiet work counts, paying attention counts, updating your address on file with your grandfather's attorney counts. None of it is glamorous, all of it is real. And sometimes the most important thing you can do for the people you love is simply refuse to look away.